My younger son, a pilot, called me. "Mom, something strange is happening. My sister-in-law is at the house." "Yes, she is," I replied. "She's in the shower." His voice dropped to a whisper. "That's impossible. I have her passport in my hands. She just boarded my flight to France." At that very moment, I heard footsteps behind me. "I'm glad you're home. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached." This morning, just like any other, I was rushing to do the dishes after breakfast. My older son, Miguel Alvarez, had left for work early, leaving the house quiet. His son, my grandson, Mateo, that clever little rascal of 7, had already been picked up by the school bus. And Camila Duarte, my daughter-in-law Miguel's wife, had just gone upstairs. Her soft voice floated down to me. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower." "Okay." I nodded, smiling. I had barely put away the last plate when the landline rang. I dried my hands on my apron and hurried to answer. The cheerful, youthful voice of my younger son, Diego Morales, filled the line. "Mom, I just wanted to say hi." I had some free time during a layover at the airport. Hearing his voice felt like a warm hug. Diego is my pride and joy, a young co-pilot who's always on the move, living out the childhood dream he had of conquering the skies. I smiled and asked him a few questions about his flight, about how he was doing. He laughed heartily and said everything was great, that work was going smoothly. But suddenly his tone changed, as if he was hesitant to say something. "Hey, Mom, something really weird happened. My sister-in-law is at the house." I was puzzled. I looked toward the stairs where I could still hear the water running in the bathroom. Of course she is, honey. "Camila is upstairs taking a shower," I replied, completely certain. Camila had talked to me less than 10 minutes ago, and she was wearing that white blouse she always wore around the house. How could I be wrong? But on the other end of the line, Diego was silent for a long while, so long that I could hear his breathing. Then his voice became very serious, full of amazement. "Mom, that's impossible because I have her passport right here in my hand. She just got on my flight headed for France." I laughed, thinking he must have been mistaken. "Oh, honey, you must have seen wrong. I just saw Camila. She even told me she was going to take a shower." I tried to explain calmly to reassure him, but he didn't laugh. He didn't answer me like he always did. He told me in a slow voice, as if he was trying to put the story in order in his head, that after all the passengers had boarded, he ran out to look for some papers he'd forgotten and accidentally found a passport lying near the boarding gate. At first he thought about giving it to the airport staff, but when he opened it to see who it belonged to, he froze. The photo was of Camila. Her name was right there, clear as day. There was no way to get it wrong. My heart began to beat faster, but I tried to stay calm. "Are you sure, Diego? That passport could be someone else's," I said, even though a tiny thorn of uneasiness had already pricked me. Diego sighed, and his voice was now a mix of bewilderment and firmness. "Mom, I just went down to the passenger cabin to check if it was her. She's sitting in first class next to a man who looks very rich and elegant." They were talking very close, like they were a couple. Diego's words were like a stab. I stood frozen, gripping the phone receiver. My head was spinning. A couple. Impossible. I had just heard Camila's voice from upstairs. I had just seen her in the flesh in this very house. But right at that moment, the sound of the water in the bathroom stopped. I heard the bedroom door open, and Camila's voice came down the stairs. It was soft but loud enough to make me jump. "Mom, who is it?" I panicked. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it was going to burst out of my chest. "Just a friend of mine," I replied quickly, my voice trembling, and I hurried into the living room to avoid Camila's gaze as she peeked her head out from the stairs, her hair still soaked. I closed the door and whispered into the phone, trying not to let my nervousness show. "Diego." I just heard Camila. "She's here. She just finished showering." "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" On the other side, Diego fell silent again, and then his voice became harsher. "Mom, it's impossible. I have her right in front of me on this plane. I'm looking at her right now. I was speechless, my mind blank. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking so much that I almost dropped the receiver. The living room suddenly felt suffocating, even though the sun was shining brightly outside. I collapsed onto the couch, trying to take a deep breath, but my chest felt heavy with an unanswered question. If Camilla was here, who was the woman on Diego's flight? And if the woman on the flight was Camilla, who was the person in my house? A few minutes later, Camilla came down to the kitchen. She was wearing a clean light blue dress, her hair still damp, and she smiled with the same sweetness as always. "Mom, I'm going to the market early today. Do you want me to get you any vegetables or anything?" Her voice was kind of familiar, as if nothing strange was happening. I looked at her, trying to force a smile, but inside I felt as if I was carrying stones. "Yes, honey. Bring some tomatoes, please," I replied, my throat dry. Camilla nodded. She took her wicker basket and walked out of the house. Her silhouette disappeared behind the gate. I stood there, watching her go with a whirlwind in my soul. I didn't believe Diego was lying to me. My son had no reason to invent a story like this. He had always been an honest boy, very sensitive and affectionate with his family. But Camilla, the daughter-in-law I had lived with for so many years, was also in front of me in the flesh, unmistakable. The sound of my son's voice still echoed in my ears, and I couldn't shake it off. Diego, my younger boy, had sworn with all the conviction of a man staring at truth that Camila, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had just stepped out of my bathroom minutes ago, was seated on his flight to France. He had her passport in his hands. He had looked her in the eye, and yet here in my San Antonio home, I had heard her gentle voice drift down the stairs and smelled the faint scent of her favorite rose soap rising from the bathroom. The contradiction clamped itself around my chest like iron chains. I told myself it must be some mistake, that maybe Diego had confused her with someone else. But a voice inside me whispered darker things, things I dared not admit aloud. I stood in the kitchen, hands trembling on the edge of the table, the silence pressing down on me until I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heartbeat. Was I losing my mind, or was there truly something I could not yet see? Camilla soon walked down the stairs, her hair damp, her dress freshly pressed. She smiled with her usual sweetness, asking if I needed tomatoes from the market. I nodded, forcing a smile of my own, but inside my thoughts spiraled like a hurricane. When she stepped out the front gate with her basket in hand, I felt an unbearable urge to follow. My son Diego's words refused to leave me. "She's right here. Mom's sitting in front of me. I swear it's her." That afternoon, as the house grew quiet, I wandered to the family wall where our photos hung. There was Miguel, my eldest, standing tall in his wedding suit, beside Camila in her white dress. There was Mateo as a newborn, so small and fragile. And there was Diego, radiant in his pilot's uniform. Once these pictures brought me comfort. Now they seemed clouded, blurred by a creeping shadow of suspicion. I picked up an old notebook from the drawer and began writing down the smallest of details. Camilla leaving at 3 o'clock, returning at 6, sometimes in different clothes, sometimes with a different smile. I told myself it was just to ease my mind. But in truth, it was the beginning of an obsession. The next day, Mateo bounded into the house with his school bag bouncing against his back. "Grandma," he said with innocent excitement, "my mom helped me with homework yesterday and her handwriting was so pretty. But today she wrote with the other hand and it was messy." He showed me the pages, one neat and elegant, the other crooked and childlike. My blood ran cold. Children do not lie. "Your mom was probably tired, sweetheart," I said, trying to steady my voice. But Mateo only looked up at me with those clear eyes and whispered, "Grandma, my mom is strange. Some days she hugs me so tight, and other days she doesn't even look at me." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the living room under the dim glow of the lamp, turning Mateo's words over in my mind. My hand trembled as I wrote in my notebook, "Her writing changes. Her moods shift. Is she two different women?" And then the new element appeared, one I could not ignore. While cleaning Camilla's room the next morning, I found a small silver locket under her pillow. It was not hers. I had never seen it before. The clasp was bent, as though it had been forced open, and inside was a faded picture of a young girl who looked strikingly like Camilla, yet not exactly. Her expression was colder, her eyes sharper. I shut the locket quickly, my heart racing. Who was this girl? Why was the locket hidden here? When Camilla returned from the market that evening, I asked casually, "Did you drop this in your room?" She glanced at it and shook her head too quickly. "No, Mom, it's just an old trinket. You can throw it away." Her answer was too fast, too practiced. She took the locket from my hand and slipped it into her apron pocket. I did not press her, but I felt the thorn drive deeper into my chest. Why hide a photograph of a girl who could be her double? Over the following days, the signs multiplied. Neighbors commented that Camilla sometimes greeted them warmly, asking about their children, and other times passed without a word, her eyes like ice. The baker down the street mentioned how your daughter-in-law had praised his bread one morning, then returned the next day with a scowl, buying the same loaf without thanks. I wrote it all down, every word, every gesture. I could no longer ignore the pattern. At dinner one evening, as we sat around the table, Miguel asked Camilla about the parent-teacher meeting scheduled for next week. She reminded him gently to take the day off. She looked the part of a perfect wife, her smile soft, her manners graceful. And yet only hours earlier I had seen her storm into the kitchen, slamming the door so hard that the dishes rattled. Was I imagining it? Or was my family being haunted by two versions of the same woman? By now, the notebook had become my silent companion. Each page bled with my doubts, my fears, my frantic search for coherence. I could no longer trust my eyes nor my ears, only the ink that testified to the contradictions piling up around me. I told myself I had to be strong, not for myself, but for Mateo and Miguel. But each night, as the wind rustled the trees outside and the streetlights flickered on our quiet San Antonio block, I wondered if I was truly safe inside my own home. The locket haunted me most of all. Who was the girl in the picture? Why did she look so much like Camilla? And why did Camilla want to hide her? I had lived long enough to know that coincidences rarely come without cost. Something was terribly wrong, and though I feared the answer, I knew I had to keep searching. The silver locket weighed heavy on my thoughts like a stone I could not set down. Every time Camilla smiled at me across the table or tucked Mateo into bed, I imagined that photograph of the strange girl staring back at me from inside the locket. Was she a memory, a warning, or perhaps a shadow of something even darker? For days, I carried the notebook under my shawl, writing down the smallest of contradictions. Camilla leaving with one basket and returning with another, speaking sweetly 1 hour and lashing out the next. Her inconsistencies were no longer small ripples in a pond. They had become waves crashing over me. Then one hot afternoon, Camilla announced in her usual gentle tone, "Mom, I'm going to the market." She slipped on her sandals, lifted her wicker basket, and stepped out through the gate. My heart told me to sit still, but my legs refused. With a burst of resolve, I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and followed her at a distance. San Antonio's streets glowed in the sun, the cobblestones reflecting heat. The market was to the right. I had walked that path with her 100 times. But this time, Camilla turned left. My stomach dropped. I pressed myself against the wall of a mechanic's shop hiding behind rusted bicycles and watched as she walked quickly into a narrow alley. The walls there were stained with peeling paint, the kind of place children avoided at dusk. Camilla stopped in front of a battered wooden door. She knocked, once looked around and slipped inside. My knees weakened. The air around me felt thick, unbreathable. I wanted to march straight to the door to confront her, but fear held me frozen. Instead, I whispered a prayer and approached slowly. I raised my hand and knocked. The door creaked open, and standing before me was a woman with Camilla's face. Same eyes, same hair, same delicate mouth, but her hands trembled as she clutched a rag, and her expression was one of fear, not calm assurance. For a moment I thought my vision had split in two. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry. I am not Camilla. My name is Isabel." The world tilted beneath me. My fingers clutched the door frame to keep from collapsing. Before I could speak, another voice called out from inside. "Isabel, don't hide anymore. She deserves to know." From the corner of the room stepped a young woman I had never seen before. She introduced herself as Luciana Herrera, Isabel's roommate. She carried herself with quiet strength and eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Please come in," she said gently. "It's time you learned the truth." The room smelled faintly of disinfectant. In the corner, an old man lay coughing on a cot, a blanket pulled up to his chest. The furniture was sparse, the walls cracked, yet the atmosphere throbbed with secrets waiting to be revealed. Isabel lowered her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Camilla paid me to take her place sometimes, go to the market, watch Mateo, even stay in your home. My parents are sick. I needed the money for medicine. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Her words cut like knives, confirming what my heart had feared. But then came the detail that made my skin crawl. Luciana leaned closer, her voice sharp. "I once saw Camilla with a man. Wealthy, elegant. His name was Alejandro Navarro. They called each other Honey. Isabel was waiting outside in the car while they met. I staggered back, my breath ragged. Diego's words thundered in my memory. She's in first class next to a rich man. As if that weren't enough, Luciana pointed toward a box on the dresser. Inside, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a second locket twin to the one I had found beneath Camilla's pillow. But this locket held a photograph of Isabel herself, younger, dressed in a simple school uniform. The locket wasn't just an ornament. It was proof. Proof that Camilla and Isabel were connected in ways I still couldn't fathom. At that moment, my confusion grew into terror. Was Camilla living a double life? And if Isabel was her mirror image, why had no one in our family ever heard of her before? The tension in that room was unbearable. I felt as though I had stumbled into one of those Reddit revenge stories that people read late at night, where betrayal drips like poison and every character hides a mask. But this was no story. It was my life, my family, my grandson's innocence, hanging by a thread. Isabel wept openly, clutching the rag until her knuckles turned white. "Please believe me," she begged. I didn't know the full truth. I only wanted to keep my parents alive. Camilla promised me money, and I was desperate. I looked at her, and though my heart burned with anger, I saw no malice in her eyes, only fear, guilt, and exhaustion. She wasn't the villain. She was another pawn in Camilla's cruel game. I left the house in a daze, stumbling into the harsh sunlight. The world around me spun the laughter of children in the distance, sounding like echoes from another universe. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the two lockets laid out before me like relics of a shattered life. My notebook lay open, its pages filled with contradictions now sharpened into evidence. Each line, each note was a stepping stone toward a truth I both craved and feared. The new element, the second locket, confirmed the darkness I had sensed. Camilla had woven a web of deception, so tangled it reached far beyond our home. Was Isabel her twin? Was she abandoned at birth? Or was this an elaborate scheme crafted to protect Camilla's secret affair with Alejandro? Questions swirled like a storm, and I knew the confrontation was coming. My chest ached with the weight of it, the tension unbearable. I thought of Miguel, who trusted Camilla with his heart. I thought of little Mateo, who only wanted a mother's love. And I thought of Diego, who had warned me from the start, his voice trembling on the phone. "She's on the plane, Mom. I swear it's her." By the time the first rays of dawn pierced the curtains, I had resolved that this would not remain hidden. If I had to sacrifice my own peace, I would protect my family from this duplicity. Some stories end with forgiveness, others with silence. But mine was heading toward revelation no matter the cost. The sun rose over San Antonio, but inside my chest there was no light, only the suffocating weight of last night's revelations. Isabel's trembling confession, the second locket in her house, Luciana's warning about Alejandro Navarro, they haunted me with the sharpness of broken glass. I sat at my kitchen table, notebook open, staring at the pages of my own handwriting. Every line told me what my heart already knew: Camilla had deceived us. But it was Isabel's face, so identical to hers, that would not leave my mind. How could two women be so alike, and why would Camilla use her look-alike to cover her tracks? I thought about my late husband. Raphael used to say, "The most dangerous betrayals are not between strangers, but within family." His words echoed now like a prophecy fulfilled. That morning, I returned to Isabel's little home. She looked weaker than before, her hands restless in her lap. Luciana guided me to sit beside her. The old man coughed faintly in the corner, and the sound of his pain made the air heavier still. "Mrs. Brooks." Isabel whispered, her voice shaking, "There is more. I think Camilla and I are connected by blood." The word blood pierced through me like an arrow. Luciana nodded, her gaze steady. Isabel's adoptive mother told us she found her abandoned as a newborn in a rural clinic. No records, no name. Just a baby girl left behind. And when Isabel met Camilla years later, they were like mirrors. Camilla knew it. She used it. My hands clenched so tightly around my notebook that the cover bent. Blood. Abandoned. Mirrors. The puzzle pieces locked into place and my stomach turned. It wasn't just deceit. It was betrayal at the deepest level. Camila, exploiting her own twin sister to shield her affair, to keep her lies hidden, while my son Miguel remained loyal and blind. I thought of Mateo, innocent Mateo, loving both versions of his mother, without knowing one was his true mom and the other was her broken shadow. Tears blurred my vision. What kind of cruelty was this? Isabel broke down completely. She never admitted it out loud, but I could feel it. The way she looked at me, the way she ordered me around as if she owned me. She knew I couldn't say no, not with my parents sick. She used me, Mrs. Brooks. My own sister used me. The word sister fell heavy between us. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I could hear only the weak breath of the old man on the cot and the steady ticking of a cheap clock on the wall. Then suddenly the truth landed inside me with such force that I almost gasped. Camilla wasn't just deceiving her husband, she was desecrating her own bloodline. I had read countless tales of betrayal on the internet, stories people shared late at night when they had no one else to confide in. They often carried tags like Reddit family tales, and I used to think they were exaggerated, written for drama. But sitting in that little room with Isabel sobbing at my side, I realized my life had become one of them, ugly, raw, unbelievable, yet real. I rose from the chair legs, trembling. "Isabel, I won't let her exploit you anymore. You've carried this shame too long. My son, my grandson, they need to know the truth. And Miguel, he deserves to see her mask ripped away." Isabel shook her head. "She'll destroy me if she finds out I told you. She has money, power. Alejandro gives her everything. I'm nothing." I knelt and took her hands. "You are not nothing. You are family. And family deserves protection, even when blood betrays itself." Luciana pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "This might help. It's a hospital record." I convinced Isabel's adoptive mother to let me copy it. Date of birth, location, weight. It matches Camilla's documents exactly. They are twins. One kept, one abandoned, and now one sacrificed the other. I stared at the paper. My heart sank, but the shock steadied my spine. There it was, proof carved in ink. Not imagination, not coincidence. Truth. That night, back at home, the atmosphere at dinner was unbearable. Miguel chatted lightly about work, trying to pull Mateo into conversation. Camila sat beside him, smiling faintly, her hand resting on his. She looked every bit the devoted wife. But I saw the cracks. I saw the wolf beneath the lamb's skin. When Mateo spilled his milk, Miguel chuckled and reached for a rag. Camila's smile vanished. She snapped at the boy, her voice sharp and cruel. Mateo shrank back, eyes brimming with tears. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. It was like watching a mask slip just enough to reveal the monster beneath. After dinner, when everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the living room alone holding Luciana's paper and Isabel's words in my mind. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was blood-deep, soul-deep. Camila had not only deceived Miguel, she had enslaved her own sister to protect her lies. I thought again of those stories labeled Reddit family tales, the ones filled with secrets of siblings betraying siblings' mothers, turning on daughters, fathers abandoning sons. I used to read them with pity. Now I felt them burn in my own flesh. My mind raced with plans. How could I expose her? How could I shield Mateo from the storm to come? How could I hold Miguel together when his heart shattered? The shock had reached its peak. I knew confrontation was no longer a choice. It was destiny. Is this voice carrying the weight of the story for you? If it doesn't move, you press 0. If it draws you in deeply, press 1. The days after discovering the hospital record felt like a storm pressing against the walls of my chest. Every time Camila entered the room carrying her basket or stirring a pot of stew, I felt the air tighten. Her smile, once a comfort, now looked like a mask held together by lies. I couldn't carry it alone anymore. Miguel, my eldest, had to see the truth. Mateo deserved to know his world wasn't twisted by deception. And Isabel, poor Isabel, used and discarded by her own blood, needed justice. That Friday evening, I set the table with unusual care. A white tablecloth, candles, roasted chicken, and rice the way Mateo liked it. It looked like a celebration, but in truth, it was the battlefield where truth would finally rip the silence apart. Miguel arrived first, weary from the week, loosening his tie as he kissed my cheek. "Mom, what's all this? Did we forget someone's birthday?" "No, Hijo," I said softly. "Tonight is important. Sit, please." Camila appeared moments later wearing her pale blue dress, her hair neatly pinned. Her eyes flickered nervously as she scanned the table. I caught that flicker and tucked it into the notebook of my heart. She knew something was coming. Mateo ran in laughter, bubbling as he climbed into his chair. His innocence stabbed at me tonight. That innocence would be shattered. But better a painful truth than a poisoned lie. We ate quietly at first. Miguel spoke about a new contract at work, and Mateo excitedly described a drawing his teacher praised. Camila chimed in with soft encouragements, her hand occasionally brushing Miguel's arm. From the outside, it was a perfect family dinner. Inside, I felt like the room was trembling with unspoken words. I took a deep breath. "Miguel, there are things I must tell you, things you deserve to hear." Camila froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. At that moment, the front door opened. Diego stepped in his pilot's jacket, still on holding a small folder in his hand. He looked grave. Behind him, Isabel entered in a simple dress, her face pale but determined. The clatter of Mateo's fork hitting the plate was the only sound for a moment. His wide eyes darted between Camila and Isabel. Why are there two moms? The innocence of his question cut deeper than any blade. Miguel dropped his spoon, his face draining of color. Camila shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "What is this circus, Stella? How dare you bring her here?" I gripped the edge of the table, steadying my voice. "Sit down, Camila. We are ending the lies tonight." Diego placed the folder on the table with a firm thud. "This is a copy of your electronic passport, Camila. Entry and exit stamps prove you were in France while Mom saw you at home. You cannot be in two places at once." Miguel's eyes darted to his wife. "Camila, what is he saying?" Before she could answer, Isabel spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "Because she used me, Miguel. I am her twin. She made me take her place in your home." The room erupted. Miguel pushed back his chair, his face twisted in disbelief. Mateo began to cry, clutching my arm. Camila slammed her fist against the table. "Lies, all lies." I rose, pulling the hospital record from my apron pocket and placing it next to Diego's folder. "These are the records, Miguel." Isabel was abandoned as a newborn, adopted by another family. The dates, the weight, the town, all identical to Camila's. She knew. She used her own blood to cover her affair. Camila's mask cracked. Her face paled, her lips trembling. But instead of shame, fury poured out. Yes, fine. It's true, Isabel is my twin. I used her, and why shouldn't I? I was trapped in this life, in this house, with nothing. Alejandro gives me more than Miguel ever could. Her confession exploded like thunder in the room. Miguel staggered back, his hands trembling. You used your own sister. You betrayed me, our son. His voice broke raw and hollow. Mateo sobbed harder. Mama, why are you so mean? Yesterday you sang to me, but today you're scary. Camilla's face twisted. You don't understand, Mateo. I did this for myself. I was suffocating here. At that moment, the new element unfolded. Luciana stepped through the back door, clutching a small voice recorder. And Alejandro. Did you plan to run away with him? Camila. Because I heard enough to know this wasn't just about suffocation. It was about greed. She pressed play, and Alejandro's voice filled the room. Leave them, Camila. Once your sister takes your place again, we can disappear with everything. Miguel's face collapsed, his fists clenching until his knuckles turned white. The betrayal was no longer abstract, it had a voice, a plan, a name. Camilla screamed, lunging for the recorder, but Isabel stepped between them. For the first time, Isabel's voice carried strength. No more, Camilla. You've used me, humiliated me, and destroyed the people who loved you. It ends tonight. The room was chaos. Miguel trembling, Mateo sobbing in my arms, Diego's jaw set in fury, Luciana holding the recorder like a weapon of truth, Isabel finally rising against her sister, and Camila unraveling in fury and desperation. For a long moment the air felt electrified, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Finally Miguel spoke, his voice hollow. Pack your things. Tomorrow we go to court. This marriage is over. Camilla's eyes blazed. You'll regret this, Miguel. All of you will regret this. She stormed out the door, slamming so hard the candles flickered out. Silence followed, broken only by Mateo's sobs and the sound of Miguel sinking into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I stroked Mateo's hair, whispering softly, though my own tears fell freely. It's over, my love. The lies are over. The night of confrontation left its scars on all of us. After Camilla stormed out with fury burning in her eyes, silence fell heavy in our home. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence after an earthquake, when everything lies broken, and you cannot yet count the ruins. Miguel sat at the table long after the candles had burned down to stubs. His head was bowed, his hands gripping the edge as though he might fall into darkness if he let go. Mateo had cried himself to sleep in my arms, and I had carried him gently to his bed, whispering lullabies that felt as fragile as my own heart. When I returned, Miguel was still there, staring at nothing. He did not look up when I laid a hand on his shoulder. It's over, Hijo, I whispered, though my voice trembled. The lies are gone. He shook his head slowly. No, Mom. The lies may be gone, but so is my life as I knew it. His voice was hollow, as if something inside him had been scooped out, leaving only an empty shell. The next morning, Miguel went to court to file for divorce. He came back pale, as if he had left a piece of himself behind on those cold courthouse steps. He told me, voice flat, that Camila had signed the papers without a tear, without a backward glance. She walked out with Alejandro as if the years with Miguel and Mateo were nothing but an inconvenient chapter. I wanted to rage. I wanted to scream at her heartlessness, but all I could feel was the crushing emptiness her absence left behind. For Mateo, it was worse. He did not understand betrayal, nor courts, nor the poisonous word affair. All he knew was that his mother had stopped singing him to sleep. At night he crept into my room, his small body trembling against mine. Grandma, he whispered, did I do something wrong? Is that why Mama left? The question shattered me. I held him close, tears soaking his hair. No, my love, you did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt everyone. But you are innocent. You are loved. Always. The new element came a week later when I went to collect the mail. An envelope thick and cream-colored sat among the usual bills. My heart stopped when I saw the sender law office of Navarro and Associates, Alejandro's name. Inside was a letter, cold, clinical. It stated that Camila had renounced custody of Mateo entirely. No visitation, no support. She wanted nothing to do with her son. I sank onto the porch steps, the paper shaking in my hands. It was abandonment, written in ink. Mateo was not just betrayed, he was erased. When Miguel read the letter, his face went ashen. "She didn't even fight," he muttered, as if the words cut deeper than if she had screamed. She just let him go. That night, he sat in the yard long after the stars came out, staring into the darkness. I watched him from the kitchen window, his figure slumped, shoulders bent. He looked like his father in the last days of his illness, haunted, hollow, already half buried by sorrow. Inside, Mateo clung to me. "Grandma, can you sing Cielito Lindo the way Mama used to, but only the nice Mama, not the mean one?" His little voice cracked, and I felt my soul split. I sang for him, though the words were drowned in my tears. Isabel, too, carried guilt heavier than she deserved. She visited often, bringing food or simply sitting with Mateo as he colored. One evening, I found her in the kitchen crying quietly as she washed dishes. "He called me Mama today," she whispered. I didn't know whether to smile or break. I took her hand. "Smile, Isabel. Because he sees your heart. He knows who stays, not who leaves." Still, the days were heavy with sorrow. The house felt different, colder, as if the walls remembered the shouting and would not forgive it. Every room carried echoes: Camila's laughter in the hallway, her humming in the kitchen, her footsteps on the stairs. Ghosts of a life that was gone, leaving only shadows behind. Miguel worked longer hours, burying himself in blueprints and contracts. At night, he often sat in silence, staring at the floor as if the betrayal played again and again behind his eyes. His voice grew quieter. His laughter vanished. Once I heard him murmur in the dark, "Why wasn't I enough?" It broke me in ways no scream could. The emptiness crept into me, too. I had fought for the truth, demanded the masks be torn away, but now that the truth stood naked before us, it was merciless. The price of revelation was despair. One evening, Diego returned from a flight and joined us for dinner. He looked around at the dim table, the silence broken only by Mateo's small chatter. His eyes lingered on Miguel's hollow face, then turned to me. "Mom," he said softly, "you saved us from her lies. But who will save us from this emptiness?" I had no answer. That night, after the dishes were cleared, I went out to the porch and held the letter from Navarro and Associates once more. The words blurred in the moonlight. A mother had abandoned her child without hesitation, and a man I once welcomed into my family had stolen her heart with promises of wealth. It was not just betrayal, it was desecration. And yet, even in that suffocating silence, I felt a small ember stir. Isabel's presence, Mateo's innocent need, even Diego's protective strength. These were fragments of hope hidden under the rubble. But at that moment they were faint, fragile, almost drowned by the weight of sorrow. The silence was not peace. It was the aching pause before whatever life would become next. The letter from Alejandro's law office was the final blow, and yet in the strange way life works, it was also the first crack through which light began to seep. Camila had abandoned Mateo, severing every tie with cold, calculated ink. It was cruel, but it also freed us from the shadow of her deceit. For days the house remained heavy with sorrow. Miguel buried himself in work, Mateo clung to me, and Isabel carried guilt she did not deserve. But then, almost without notice, something began to shift. It started with Mateo. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Grandma, can Isabel sing me to sleep?" I turned surprised to see Isabel standing shyly in the doorway. Her eyes widened, her hand trembling as she touched her chest. Mateo nodded with innocent certainty. "Yes, because when you smile, it feels warm." So Isabel sat by his bed and began to hum Cielito Lindo. Her voice was shaky at first, but soon it grew steady, tender, filled with something deeper than obligation. Mateo's eyelids fluttered closed, a small smile on his face. Watching them, I felt tears roll down my cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of release. From that night on, Isabel became part of our rhythm. She helped with homework, braided Mateo's hair, and laughed with him in ways I hadn't seen in so long. The house, once haunted by echoes of deceit, began to breathe again. Miguel noticed too. At first, he was hesitant, guilt weighing on him for even smiling after so much pain. But one afternoon, I found him in the yard with Isabel watching Mateo chase a ball. For the first time in months, there was light in his eyes. Weeks turned into months, and the bond grew stronger. Isabel, once only a shadow of Camilla's schemes, revealed her own soul, gentle, steady, full of kindness. She was not Camilla's substitute. She was Isabel, and she was becoming the heart of our family. One evening, Miguel asked her to join us for dinner, officially no longer just as a visitor. Isabel hesitated, her cheeks flushed, but she sat at the table, her laughter mingling with Mateo's. That night, I saw my son look at her with something I thought he had lost forever, hope. The new element came when Miguel, after months of quiet healing, gathered us all in the living room. He held a small velvet box in his hand. His voice trembled, but his eyes were clear. "Isabel," he said softly, "you were forced into our lives through lies. But you stayed with truth. You cared for my son when his mother walked away. You healed what was broken in me. I don't want to waste another day. Will you be my wife and Mateo's mother in every way?" The room fell silent. Isabel covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mateo jumped up, clapping his hands. "Say yes, Auntie, say yes," through sobs, Isabel whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." That wedding was not grand. There were no glittering chandeliers or orchestras. Instead, it was held in our backyard beneath the Texas sun, with roses tied to the fence, and Mateo holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Diego flew in from his roots standing tall as best man. I sat in the front row, my heart swelling, as I watched my son take Isabel's hand, their faces glowing with joy. When the vows were spoken, I wept openly. They were not tears of loss, but tears of redemption. Out of betrayal had come loyalty. Out of abandonment had come belonging. Out of despair had come rebirth. That night, as music and laughter filled the air, I stepped aside for a moment, gazing at the scene. Mateo danced clumsily with Isabel, his laughter ringing like bells. Miguel held her close, whispering words of love. Diego clinked glasses with neighbors who had once watched our pain unfold. And me, I felt peace I hadn't known in years. I remembered Raphael's words, "The truth will set you free." It had nearly destroyed us, but in the end, it had delivered us to something greater. The message for you, my dear listener, is simple: betrayal may cut deep, but truth and resilience can carve a brighter path. Families are not built only by blood, but by love, by loyalty, by those who choose to stay when others walk away. Camilla's betrayal will always be a scar, but scars remind us not only of pain, but of survival. We survived, we healed, and we rose stronger. As I sit here tonight, the porch light casting a warm glow on my journal, I know this chapter of my life is not one of endings, but of beginnings. Mateo sleeps peacefully. Isabel hums softly as she folds laundry, and Miguel sketches plans for a future that finally feels worth building again. It is truly a new dawn. My dear friends, thank you for staying with me through this journey from suspicion and heartbreak to healing and light. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and watch the next stories waiting for you. Your support keeps these voices alive.